The rain poured heavily that night, washing the dusty streets of Ibadan. Under an old wooden shed sat a shivering girl, no more than 14. Her name was Grace. Her hair was messy, her feet bare, and her eyes told stories of hunger and heartbreak. She had lived in the orphanage since she was 7, but the place had long stopped feeling like home. When the matron told her that a woman wanted to adopt her, Grace thought it was a miracle. The woman's name was Mrs. Helen, a gentle-looking lady with warm eyes and a soft voice. Her husband, Mr. Daniel, was a tall man with a calm face and an unreadable smile. They had no children, and everyone in the neighborhood praised them for taking Grace in. At first, everything felt like a dream. Grace had her own bed, clean clothes, and food she didn't have to fight for. Helen treated her kindly, teaching her how to cook, read, and pray every night. Grace often whispered to herself, "Maybe I can finally belong somewhere." But Daniel's eyes told a different story. He began watching her too closely, calling her, "my little girl," with a voice that made her uncomfortable. At first, she tried to ignore it. She didn't want to cause trouble for Helen, who had shown her so much love. But one night changed everything. Helen had traveled to Lagos for a church conference, leaving Grace and Daniel alone in the house. Grace tried to stay in her room, locking the door, but Daniel came knocking. His voice was calm, too calm, as he told her he needed help with the generator. She hesitated, but he forced the door open. The night that followed stole something from her, something she could never get back. Days turned into weeks, and Grace lived in silence. She smiled when Helen was home, cooked meals, and did chores, but her eyes lost their light. Daniel warned her, "If you tell anyone, I'll make sure you go back to the streets." She believed him. But one day, Helen noticed the bruises on Grace's arm. She asked softly, "Who did this to you?" Grace froze. Tears filled her eyes, but the words refused to come. Helen grew suspicious. She started watching closely, noticing how Grace avoided Daniel's eyes, how she flinched when he entered the room. When Helen finally found out the truth, overhearing Daniel threaten Grace one night, her world shattered. She couldn't speak, her hands trembled as she listened from behind the kitchen wall. The man she loved had become a monster. The next morning, Helen packed a small bag for Grace and drove her to a quiet village, far away. "You'll stay with my cousin for now," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry, my child. I should have protected you." Grace stayed silent, but her heart burned with something stronger than fear, revenge. 2 years passed. Grace grew into a beautiful young woman, quiet but fierce. She had learned tailoring and worked at a small shop in town. One day, she saw Daniel's face again. He was running for a local council position. His posters filled the streets, smiling as if nothing had ever happened. Grace's hands trembled as she stared at his picture. That night, she made a decision. She began writing, not letters, but truth. Every word she wrote carried her pain. With Helen's help, she exposed him, to the church, to the press, to the people. When the story broke, Daniel's world fell apart. He lost everything, his reputation, his wealth, and his peace. On the day of his public arrest, Grace stood at a distance, wearing a simple white dress. Her eyes met his, no tears, no anger, just quiet strength. He looked away, ashamed. Helen stood beside her, holding her hand. "You are free now," she whispered. Grace smiled faintly. "I've always been free," she said softly. He just never knew it. As the crowd carried Daniel away, the rain began to fall again, washing the streets just like the night Grace was found. Only this time, the rain didn't hide her tears. It celebrated them. She walked forward, her step steady, her heart light. The girl who once lived in silence had found her voice, and it was beautiful.